Planning Committee, Wednesday the 2nd of July 2025. The first question, as always, is do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Murphy?
It's just a question for the Environment Solicitor, if we can, please. Have we
Certainly.
been given special dispensation? Because a lot of these applications are in relation to OMBC land.
Yeah,
So
the fact that they all
Sorry,
relate to the
clarity,
council
please.
means that obviously every member of the council is involved, so we wouldn't be able to deal with them any other way. So yes, it's not a problem. It's obviously it's your application, so everybody's aware of that.
Apologies, it wasn't always the first question, but we asked it anyway. Do we have any apologies?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any urgent business?
None received.
Okay, do we have any public questions?
None received, Chair.
Okay, we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 4th of June 2025 for members' approval. We'll get all in favour? Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the meat of it, I'd like to hand over to Peter, who's going to do a bit of an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, thank you, committee. Just wanted to give a quick intro before we get into it, just to set some context, really. So obviously tonight there are 6 applications on the agenda, and obviously I have to stress that we do have to take each of those 6 in turn and consider them all separately. They have to be considered and decided on their own merits, and gone through individually in that way, in the same way we would with any other application. But obviously there is a bigger context here in terms of all 6 are part of a wider redevelopment in the town centre, part of the wider town centre living proposals to reinvigorate the town centre and what have you. So obviously there's some context there that I wanted to just touch through before we get into them individually. So town centre living proposals are a partnership between the council and our developer partner Muse. Muse are the applicant, and they're represented here tonight by Alex Vogel, who will be able to speak on the applications in turn and help answer any questions. And he has the Muse consultant team alongside him as well to get into any detailed questions if any should arise. So they'll be invited to speak in the usual way, as we would with any application, and answer your questions. Similarly, members of the committee all received a briefing pack via email from Muse's consultants from a Turley's email address. This pack has been included in the late list as well, just for clarity, so make sure you're all aware of it, and so that any members of the public who are following committee tonight can be aware of that as well if we need to refer to it at any point tonight. I do stress that is only a summary briefing. Obviously the officer report is the focal point and needs to be your primary reference for your decision making, but the summary that Muse provided is a really helpful overview briefing, and I say it may be something that you've had a look at and you may have questions coming out of that, so we can refer to it. But ultimately, I suppose the key matter to be conscious of in terms of the wider context of these 6 applications tonight, as we consider each of them individually, is that collectively they're not ordinary developments. Let's be honest about this. Let's be clear about it. These are developments being pursued as part of a wider regeneration of the town centre by a public-private partnership. Inevitably, they will utilise a degree of public funding from the government, I would stress, rather than from the council coffers, particularly as the early phases come forward, because we're creating an entirely new town centre residential market through these developments that currently doesn't exist in Oldham, obviously assuming that you approve the applications tonight. So there is a difference compared to a typical development, and the way the development will come forward and happen and how it will be funded will not be like a typical housing development. But the council and Muse are committed to ensuring a sustainable and mixed-use residential-led development across the town centre, including a significant proportion of affordable and social homes. Again, should the committee approve the applications tonight. So just want to give that bit of that context and being aware that because it is a bit different, and I know you don't really need encouragement in this because you're very good at asking questions every time we meet, but I do encourage you to ask questions of us as officers, of Muse and the consultant team, if you're unclear on any of the planning aspects of the cases before you tonight, because I say it is different. Finally, as well, I just want to stress that, of course, the developments will not happen overnight. We're talking about a large number of new homes in the town centre, and a number of the applications before you tonight as a committee are actually outline planning applications, because it could take us more than 10 years to deliver all of these homes in the town centre, and so a lot of the applications are outline, with detail coming forward through reserved matters applications later. But obviously the earlier phases, such as the Prince's Gate application and the first phase of the Civic Centre site, are in detail for you tonight. But as we go through the applications, Graham and I will explain what's what and what you're able to consider, compare in terms of whether it's an outline application or a detailed application. But I just want to set that context, obviously, because you're being asked to look at 6 different applications, but there are different levels of detail in that. So I will shut up now. I just want to say thank you in advance for what I know you will thoroughly undertake your scrutiny of the applications tonight on the agenda. And with the Chair's agreement, I will just pass on to Graham to start presenting the first item.
Yes, that's fine. I just wanted to pass on thanks for the committee for you and your team's continued efforts and endeavours. Okay, over to Graham for the first one, which is the former Civic Centre and Queen Elizabeth Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So as you say, this is the first of 6 applications. 4 of the applications, these will be the first 4 that we're looking at tonight, are the housing related proposals. They're a mix of outline and to some extent full applications, and obviously, as Peter says, we'll explain as we go along where those differences are. This first application relates to the Civic Centre site itself. So this is basically, you'll know it, it's the whole of the area that's enclosed by West Street, Rochdale Road, New Radcliffe Street and the bus station, with the exception of the Civic Tower, which is outside the scope of this application, but obviously appears later in this agenda as a separate application. As we go through them, as Peter says again, there'll be some common themes, and these are the principles on which the developments are taking place. A number of those relate to the process that members will be aware of when we deal with housing applications normally, for instance, financial contributions and the way those come forward. And as has just been explained, it is slightly different on this application. So for instance, in relation to affordable housing, you'll see that in the report there is a different approach here that acknowledges how this development or these developments will come forward, the relationship with the council and the expectation that there will be a significant proportion of affordable units. But at the present time, we're not able to define that level, given there is this need for attracting investment into the schemes, and obviously government money is again to be brought forward to bring forward developments of this type. So this particular scheme, this is the hybrid one. So this is one where there's a mix of the full and the outline. The full element of it is one of the blocks that I'll show you as we go forward, which is intended to be brought forward as a first phase development, obviously following demolition of that part of the site that needed to be done for that. And then the outline phases, again, as members understand, they'll come forward at a later stage with obviously other applications, the reserved matters applications coming forward for those, and given the scale of those, of course, they'll be brought before members as well, so you'll look at the final details of those. I will be showing you some indicative details, but again, these are giving you an indication of what's envisaged on the site, but these are not the precise details that would be approved if members supported the resolution tonight. So obviously this is the site. You'd be pleased to know I've not done lots of photographs of this, seeing as you sat inside it and you all obviously know the site well. The area, just to point out on this aerial view, so in the kind of middle left-hand corner of the site, next to New Radcliffe Street, that's where I'll show you the details of the block, which is the full application, the one intended to come forward as a first phase of the development. The rest of the site will come forward in various phases, and we'll go through that. So these are just showing you effectively the blocks as they would come forward. So effectively the area in white, as I say, we've got more details of that I can show to you. The other 2 blocks on the left corner and then the 3 blocks at the top right, and they're the 5 phases that will come forward at a later stage, and as I say, will be subject to later reserved matters applications. This is indicative. It shows you landscaping within the site area itself. As I say, the block in the top left, that's defined. That's what we're looking for members to determine in detail today. The rest of those blocks are indicative of what is envisaged to come forward. But of course, as the reserved matters come to us, there may be some variation of that. In the bottom left is obviously the Civic Tower, and that will be retained. So this is just giving you a very, very indicative image of how the applicants see development coming forward. Obviously looking at the topography of the site, looking at the fact that the Civic Tower will be retained as part of the development as the taller of the structures. So therefore, effectively, we're looking at raising the heights of buildings as we come through, and it creates therefore a streetscape, particularly as you're approaching from Middleton direction, Chellerton direction onto the site. Clearly with the tower there and with the health authority building next to it, the principle of large developments, if you like, tall buildings on this part of the town centre is already established. This obviously, given the light, would be very difficult to see, but it's almost making the same point. So the block at the top, starting left to right, is showing an indicative height, and if you can see it, it's rising up as you get towards the bus station. And the bottom view is taken effectively from Rochdale Road, and similarly, if you could see it clearly, would be intended to show how the blocks as you go behind, so they won't be hidden, they'll form additional features on the street scene. This is an indicative again, which basically shows you the areas between the buildings. So this is what's envisaged as being the communal space between the buildings themselves, with a mixture of steps and ramped areas to get down the slope within the site. But as you can see, the intention is not merely that these are residential blocks standing in isolation. It's intended that the landscaping around them, the areas for public movement within them, will all form part of the attraction of the development. Within the later phases, it's obviously envisaged as well that some of the ground floor units will be commercial units, so they could be shops, cafes, educational buildings and so forth within there, and that detail will come forward as we move to the reserved matters applications. So this is showing you two things in a way. The top left-hand corner is showing the layout of the main building. I've got a closer view of that on the corner. So as its principal elevation facing towards Rochdale Road, it's elevated from Rochdale Road, which of course, as you'll all know, the Civic Centre building is at the moment. The rest of the site is just giving you an indication that what we're looking at, and there's a condition recommended for further details of this as we come forward. As the various plots come forward, obviously we'll be looking to try to retain, as far as we can, existing uses on the site, which obviously includes car parking on there. So as we move forward and areas get developed on the site, we will be looking for a plan which updates that situation, so we can make sure that access to other uses within the site and obviously neighbouring premises are not going to be affected by the development of the site as it comes forward. So this is the main block. As you can see, it's kind of C-shape to it with the principal elevation towards Rochdale Road and then to New Radcliffe Street, with servicing areas around the back of the site. And one of the issues obviously we made is reference in the report is to do with car parking, and it is quite part of the assessment of what the form of development would be, with it being a very sustainable town centre location, that there is, other than the provision of a proportion of disabled persons parking spaces, which are those in the middle of the site you can possibly work out in the building, there will be no other car parking provided. And the report sets out in detail the reasoning for that and the justification for that in terms of the parking strategies for the town centre, and also the simple fact that it is intended to try to create that sustainability in developments. Oldham doesn't have that at the moment, but you'll know there are other towns or the cities in the country where similar arrangements do work. You know, the old ideas of 1 or 2 car parking spaces per dwelling do not necessarily apply, and yet those developments are successful. Access will be off New Radcliffe Street, which is on the extreme right of that image, as will access to the remaining portions of the site. So there'll be no direct through routes to West Street from the site, other than obviously for pedestrians and cyclists. So this is the image from Rochdale Road. So obviously, and the top right is just, again, if you can see it with the shadows, is to give an indication of the detailing that's envisaged on the building, so that we don't have just a plain frontage to that, so we get detailing within the brickwork, which is the facing material to be used on the principal elevations. And that, as I say, will be in the kind of top left, if you like, the Rochdale Road, Radcliffe Road, Radcliffe Street, New Radcliffe Street junction. Again, these are just other images from the other directions. Obviously, the side elevation there from New Radcliffe Street on the top image, and the image at the bottom there is from within the site. It's, again, difficult to make out as a 2D drawing, but again with a recessed section within the middle of the site. And this is an internal layout of the site, which sets out how it's envisaged that the service areas, these are the ones at the back in the kind of grey colours, will be placed around the site, and then the apartments largely with principal views facing out across the site. All of these apartments will be required to meet national space standards, is now policy as required. These again just showing you the upper floor elements of them, with obviously this dedicated to the residential units rather than including the service areas below. So again, just to complete that image, is just reiterating now. So the image on the right is the full applications. So this is the detail where we're asking members to agree the actual precise design of it. So the layout of the site, the design of the building, the shape of the building, its height, and so forth. Landscaping, obviously, as you can see, the green areas around the principal elevations, which includes onto Rochdale Road, where there is landscaping at the moment. The image on the left, again, just reiterates what was said previously, which is that the various other plots to come forward will be the subject of later applications. So obviously within the report, there are various conditions that have been recommended in there. One of the conditions relates to reassessment on the outline applications for potential contributions for public open space and education. As Peter said, you know, it's likely these schemes will come forward over an extended time period, and therefore we need those issues to be reassessed at the time. As a result of that, you'll see on the late list, we're just for clarity adding effectively Peter's reference in there, so that when any legal agreements that are required for this come forward in order to implement the development, that authorisation is given to the Assistant Director for those to be concluded in liaison with the Borough Solicitor. So as I say, the number of conditions, quite a lot of conditions on there, some of which relate just to the full application, some of which relate to both full and outline, and some of which will obviously relate to just the outline application itself. So subject to those conditions and to the update notes in the late list, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have any... Councillor?
Thank you, Graham, for that. Looks like a great idea, but you've got 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. Is there anywhere where children are going to be able to play outside? Because they're going to go outside. I'm not seeing anything. Can you just elaborate on that? Thank you.
Yeah, there are, as indicated on one of the layout, there'll be areas of public space within the development itself. But the other point to make really is that this is part of the wider vision for the town centre, and members will previously have been made aware, obviously, of the linear park process, the links through to that are now being improved. Obviously, the Snipe, following its demolition, that area is now open to the public, and it was nice to see the other day when I was heading out for my lunchtime paper that there were quite a few people sitting out on there and enjoying that space. So that will link through to the linear park. As the developments come forward, the linear park will be completed. So there are planning permissions in for that already. Some work on that has obviously already started there. So in terms of easy access play space for families, if families move into there, they will be provided primarily within that area. But as I say, there will also be ancillary landscaped areas and communal areas within the development site itself. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hobin?
Thanks, Chair. Mine's, I'm going to get it out of the way now because it probably affects everything that comes forward tonight. But mine's more an observation and a statement, really. It's just, we seem to have had these things done in the 60s and 70s, don't we? These blocks, these tower blocks things. At the time, they were the next best thing. And looking at the plans and that, I just look and think, are we ending up in another 30 years with these tower blocks looking as bad as the ones that we're seeing now that are crumbling? And I know that it's going on everywhere, and we've got the Green Quarter in Manchester and places like that where all this is coming up. It's just, for me, it's that I would have liked to have seen houses, and I know it's space, and I know that we've gone on that, and it probably won't affect the applications, but it's a shame that we're going down the tower block kind of route again that happened in the last generation, and we're not looking at proper family houses. That was all I wanted to say. I mean, it'll be my thoughts as well through the evening, probably, on all of the plans. And it's just, I find it really strange. I wish I was an architect these days, because it seems to be very easy to just draw a box and put windows in it, instead of us having aesthetic things that we can look at. You know, instead of nice buildings, we seem to always come forward with square tower blocks. That's my rant for this evening. I'll leave the rest to you.
Just coming in there, I think the question is, and I take on board your sentiments, and I think it's one that's been aired by a few people, is the experiment in the 60s and 70s to build these high-rises from a social perspective didn't work, and we ended up pulling them down. They became hotbeds of crime, people became isolated, people became disenfranchised. So I think there's a lot of, the question is, how will these work? And they didn't, and I think that's something we need to put to the developer when we get chance. But no, thanks for that. Councillor Harkness?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I want to, obviously, looking at this particular part of the application, but obviously, Peter's talking about, we've got this block as a whole. Now, just totting up, I know we've not got the exact figures yet, but just totting up the number of residential properties is going to be is about 1,669, I think, topping up the numbers I've just gotten there. Now, we're losing some parking spaces. Now, I know you said that it's a sustainable location, not everyone's going to have cars. and there's going to be another plan for parking spaces somewhere, you know, as part of the wider scheme. But we haven't got that information right now. So what reassurance is, this might be for the developer as a question, but what reassurance is going to have that actually we're not going to have, you know, thousands of more people in, there's nowhere anywhere to park. You've touched on education, and at the moment with these 838 houses, they might not necessarily need additional education places, but in the future going forward, and that's part of your 106 agreement. But what isn't included in that is around doctor spaces, because obviously the numbers we've got there, we're going to need more doctors as well. So is there any sort of conversations around making sure that we've got that provision as well?
I'll let Peter come in on that one.
Yeah, so taking the parking first of all, I mean, there's two sides to the parking thing. One is about provision for the new residents, and so the position is that ultimately in a sustainable location like this, I think we talked about it last time, didn't we, when we had the Riley's Snooker Club application too. People buying or renting these properties know what they're getting. They're getting a town centre development and they don't have a parking space. So you wouldn't buy it if you needed a car, unless you could find, you were sure you could find parking somewhere else nearby. So I think from the residential perspective, and again, maybe a question you want to ask the developer when they're speaking, you know, we're comfortable that this is an appropriate way to deal with it in a town centre location. In terms of the existing public car parking, appreciate what you're saying. You know, tonight you don't have any guarantees, if you like, that that is going to be re-provided. Obviously, all I can say is, as a council, we are committed to trying to re-provide as much as we can. So there's, again, two elements to that. One, if you can flip back a few slides, Graham, in terms of the plan that for this site, particularly as an example, where once Block A is built, that was it, perfect. You know, yeah, so the bottom left there is showing a bit of a compound, potentially for the, obviously for the development, the ongoing development, but the rest of the site, again, bearing in mind the QE Hall would also have gone, so the rest of the site will be laid out temporarily, continue as car parking. Obviously, as the development goes on, phase by phase, you'll lose bit by bit, but that gives us time to put in place a solution elsewhere in the town centre. So again, as part of my remit and in terms of my role, we are looking at that. We've got several other surface car parks where we could potentially create decked car parks to replace what we're losing. There may be other solutions that come up as we go through, but it's something we're really clear on. We know we are losing public car parking, but we want to re-provide it in a better way that ensures there's, for example, more EV charging, there's spaces, more disabled spaces, there is spaces for taxis and what have you, cycle parking as well, motorcycle parking. So it's an opportunity. I appreciate the concern right now, but we are committed to re-providing it and re-providing it better and in better locations for all the different destinations in the town centre. In terms of the second point around contributions, so while health isn't specifically mentioned in the condition, because we don't have a set way of collecting contributions towards health at the moment, as Graham alluded to, in terms of the ground floor uses, both on this site and potentially on some of the other sites that we'll look at tonight around the town centre, as they come forward later, that's an opportunity. We have ground floor uses, you know, there's only, to a point, there's probably only so many shops or cafes or what have you we can provide. There'll be space for, if it's needed for education or for nursery care, for example, or there might be space for doctor surgeries if that's what's required. But we're in conversation with the NHS services to understand what it is they think they will need as we go forward. Often we have a large ICC on the doorstep already. Do they need any more facilities in the town centre to serve the growing population that this will create?
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Mine is similar to Councillor Hartness's, and I do sound like a broken record when we talk about housing. 3 words: infrastructure, 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 and I make no apologies for raising it again. So when we talk about contributions for green space and education, Gav's already mentioned about the health and doctors' surgeries and things like that. What I'm going to ask you about is contributions towards Oldham Royal that's ultimately going to have to, unfortunately, may have to deal with some of the residents who have got health concerns from these 1,600 properties that we're probably going to discuss, 1,600 houses or accommodation that we're going to discuss tonight. So it's not just about providing doctor's surgeries from underneath, and that's great when you can. It's about the existing pressures, and you only have to go on in A&E, pick any day you want, at any time. You will see ambulances parked outside. You will see people in the corridors. It looks like something out of a disaster film at half the time. And now we're going to put an extra 1,600 properties in there. So my question is in relation to the contribution to our health service, mainly Oldham Royal. Thank you.
So again, that's part of the wider conversation we're having with health services. It's not necessarily for, well, okay, certainly not appropriate for any new development to fix existing problems. You know, I've made that clear before in this committee. You know, any kind of infrastructure, it's not for development to fix existing issues. It's about what additional issues, if you like, or impacts would the new development have. Obviously, this alone, it can't fund new hospitals or improvements at the hospitals on its own. That's got to be a much bigger conversation about not just national, but thinking about, you know, what collectively as a borough, how are we growing, and how can that be resolved? And it's not necessarily about expanding the hospital or anything like that. It actually could be about how services are done more locally and that kind of thing, and using more outpatient services elsewhere in the borough. So I think it's a much bigger and much more complicated conversation than simply saying this development's having this many units, it will have this impact on the hospital. It's much bigger than that in terms of the conversation. So, as I say, what we're focusing on in terms of health is there's opportunities to provide, potentially, at the ground floor level, services for health in later phases of this development, if that's what the health services want. And we can explore that with Muse as the developer in terms of trying to find a solution for that. But it's not for this development or these developments to fix the existing issues at the hospital.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just going to say to Peter, because we have developments all the time, and we get these questions all the time, as Brian said, as someone said, that they always ask the same question, and fair enough. But have we done like surveys and think, right, well, everybody that comes live in the Oldham area, they're already with a GP, so that's where they'll more than likely continue to go. The kids are already at school, so they're more than likely to carry on with that. So generally, do we have like a generality on that, where how it works, and would it work in this case? Probably similar.
So I suppose it's twofold in terms of what you're saying. So taking education as an example, because we have a clear policy on that. There is first of all, you have to look at a new development and say, is there already capacity in the existing education system around it? You know, local primary schools, obviously secondary schools, borough-wide. Is there enough capacity for the demand that will be created by this development? If there's not, we then have to look at, okay, should there be a contribution from that development? In this case, we're comfortable, obviously, in terms of the detailed phases that we're talking about. There are plenty of schools in close vicinity of the town centre that can take any children that we're moving into these properties, either from within the borough or from elsewhere. But we've got that condition in because obviously later phases, we'll review it again at that point and say, what's the capacity like now? You know, we have got a decline in birth rate, so actually in theory there may well be more space in the future in local schools, but we'll look at that at that point when the detailed application comes in for those different phases. But we have the mechanism there for that, and we'll review it in that way as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, you can, certainly can, Sir David.
If I can come back there, Chair, thanks. No, the point I was making was that people are already with a GP and they're already with the school, they're at with the children if they've got children. And what I was thinking is that they may remain with the school they're already at, or they may remain with the GP. I mean, what stats and what stats have we got? Would that be backed up with any stats, if that's the case?
That's factored into how the calculation has been worked out, for example, for education. I mean, obviously, there is you're right in what you're saying. Some of the properties will be taken up by existing Oldham residents, and they may stay at the schools or GPs already at. But of course, where they're moving out from will now become vacant as well. So I think it's still fair to look at the total number of dwellings being created and use that as a basis for a calculation.
Any further questions for the officers? No? Okay, I'd like to call Mr. Vogel and his team, although we may not have enough chairs at the top table, so...
Bring a couple of chairs with you.
Am I okay to call you Alex?
Yes.
I have to ask, we're on camera. So we're in a bit of a unique position, should we say, in terms of protocol, because obviously you're the applicant for all of these. There's a range of, I'd say, general questions which are relevant to all of them in terms, and then there's obviously specifics regarding each and individual application. So I think probably the best way to go, if you just spend a few minutes just explaining who you are and who Muse is and what your vision is and etc. Yeah. Thank you.
Does it work? Yes, it does. So I'm good to meet you all, and thanks for coming this evening. I'm Alex Vogel. I'm one of the senior development managers at Muse. I have got very much I've lived and breathed this for the last 18 months, really, and seen firsthand through the work that we did and the public consultation that we did as part of the development framework, the pride that the local community and Oldhamers have in the town centre. And that was really what helped us shape the development framework, which set out the original vision that was approved at Cabinet last November. Us as Muse, we're in a 15-year partnership with Oldham Council. We are generally a very long-term regeneration partner, and this is exactly the sort of scheme and development that we have done time and time again, and that we enjoy working on, because we're able to really utilise the skill set and working in partnership and build on relationships to help deliver change in areas. We've got a 40-year history of creating mixed-use communities, and it's a word that gets thrown out a lot, but it's real placemaking. So as Peter alluded to earlier, we're looking to essentially create a new town centre living market here, and placemaking is part of that. And it's not about building blocks and blocks and blocks. You need to think about what the community is going to work like. You need to think about the new neighbourhood. So if you take the civic centre that we've just spoken about and the future applications that we'll run through later on this evening, you're looking at a new neighbourhood that's coming in, and the thought that's gone into that in terms of the design, in terms of the permeability of pedestrian links and access and all around it. We're thinking about how are people going to live and work and explore this space and visit Oldham, and how will it benefit the town and the town centre. In total, obviously, we're delivering just over 1,600 homes with these applications, with commercial floor space to help activate frontages so that it's not just residential all across. You've got that, whether it's shops, cafes, doctors' surgeries, you've got that activity there. That brings an element of activity to the area, but also safety and surveillance as well. And in terms of the civic centre proposals, I think the key aim that I've had across, and just talking about the wider master plan as a whole, the aim and the vision that was set out in the framework was to help deliver new investment into the town centre, drive footfall, bring further spend and keep the pound in Oldham, essentially. And I think the provision of the homes coupled with the activity that Oldham will see over the next 10 to 15 years will really bring confidence to others as well, and whether that's central government or anyone else, to bring in and say that this is happening now and this is coming forward. And I think it's a game-changing and I guess once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver this over the next decade or so. As much as the footfall and the investment is good, we're also looking to make it more greener and more sustainable. So looking at biodiversity net gains, improving the cycling and walking pedestrian links throughout all of the developments and how they then interact with the town centre and how you can move from east to west and north to south. And I guess from a general regeneration point of view, this is what we do best, and we have a history of working very successfully with local authority partners. I've certainly enjoyed the last 16 months or so working on this scheme. I'm genuinely very excited to see how this can progress and what the next 5 to 10 years looks like for this, because how I found it, coming from a more private developer background, when you work in partnership, you can really sit there and have the ambition to drive it forward. And I think what we did at the early stages with the consultation has allowed us to take as much feedback on board as we can to then say, okay, well, you said this is how we've actioned it. Or if we aren't able to action it, this is why we're not able to. So I guess I'm glad and obviously very thankful for all of you attending this evening, and would respectfully ask that you help support this to move it forward and kind of reach that milestone that we set out to achieve.
Okay, thank you. I've just got one point before I hand you over to my colleagues. There is nobody's going to miss the current building we're in and the usage of the land. I mean, it's a brutalist monstrosity, I would argue. It's like something off a Stanley Kubrick film, and I think people will be glad to see the back of it. But obviously, it's what we replace it with, and just something Councillor Holbein said, which really resonated with me, because I think there are some concentric ideologies in what you're saying, and the previous visions previous governments have had. With the kind of developments you're talking about, in particular high-rise, close-knit, town centre, etc., etc. Now, it's been an accepted principle that they didn't work. I mean, there's reasons why they didn't work, obviously the construction, the way they were thrown up, etc., etc. But it's more why they failed was the social aspects and the community aspects, how it degenerated in essence in a lot of areas because people became isolated and boxed off. So the question I have to ask is, what is the difference between that mindset and yours, and why will this be a success? What's the difference?
No, it's a very good question. I think the key thing that I see being different of the way that we're developing and looking at the town centre as a whole is we're really focusing on the neighbourhood aspect and the community aspect. It's not going to be a single tenure across, let's say the civic centre. There'll be a mix of tenures, and you're going to have the ambition for, let's say there's social housing there may be affordable rented housing, there may then be private rented housing in terms of build to rent run by a professional operator, and then some market sales. So it gives you that breadth of different tenures for people to live and work there. And I guess the sense of going back to the placemaking point again, we're not just sitting there going, okay, we've got a plot of land and it looks like it can fit, 6 tower blocks on it. You're thinking ahead of that. You're thinking about, okay, well, how will that interact with the rest of the town centre? How are we going to make the Magistrates Court site work in conjunction with the civic centre to create that new neighbourhood in the western part of the town centre, and how will that then feed through? So it's all about the initial thought process of design and how it can complement it and how you can create that safe space for the residents as and when they move in.
So it's more of a cohesive type strategy you're looking at rather than
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's we want to have the mobility for people who live in these developments when they're constructed, so that you don't feel like you're just living there and nothing else. So it's that whole wider community piece that I think is really important.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I've got experience of working in place working and in housing over the last couple of decades in Manchester, so I can clearly see the actual sort of vision that we're trying to create and in terms of our ambition, etc. But obviously, you've said that this is a once in a generational sort of opportunity. What assurances can you give us that in terms of what we're trying to create here will be actually sustainable in terms of attracting economically active residents into the town centre, because that is what we want to create and change the demographics of the town centre itself. And with the lack of parking that that we've got at the moment in the actual development itself, will it attract those prospective residents? And if so, how? And what's gained by Councillor Davis's point in terms of, are there any statistics or any sort of research that you can share with us here that will ensure that we will attract those type of new residents into the town centre?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. In terms of who we would look to attract, the demographic, if you want to call it, and the mix of tenures that we'll have, if you're looking at, let's say, build to rent and the private rented model that may be there on some of the blocks, we'll be looking at a mix of families, young professionals, older people as well, and creating that the locations that these developments are in are obviously have got fantastic transport links either throughout Oldham town centre but also into Manchester city centre as well. And the difficulty and the challenge we're going to have, and there'll be plenty of challenges over the next 10 to 15 years. That's just how development works, and that's almost part of the journey that you go on to make it through, is going to be, we're creating something new in Oldham town centre. It hasn't been done before in terms of this level of scale and residential. So it'll always be a challenge there. We're confident from what we've seen elsewhere in other town centres, whereby the demographic of people that would look to live in there. I mean, if you take Oldham town centre as a location and say, okay, well, what's on my doorstep? You've got the Peak District, you've then got Manchester in 20 minutes on the tram. It's a highly accessible location. And so it will attract a varying range of people who would want to live there and suddenly think, oh, actually, this new offering that's come forward, definitely. I don't want to be right in the Manchester city centre, but I've always liked to be able to go out to the Peaks at the weekend or pop it back into town if I want to. It gives them that option, and it gives you that option for people to move there, whereas before that offering wasn't there. In terms of the parking, I might have to pass to you, as you are the parking expert, but I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. My name's James Howe. I work for a company called WSP, and we've been advising on transport and access for the town centre sites. So, yeah, in terms of parking for residents, I think really what we've got here is like probably the most sustainable location in terms of transport in the whole of the borough, in the town centre. So removing that need for access to car for a lot of local facilities like your town centre uses and everything that's in the town centre, health, entertainment, shopping and the like. In terms of access to jobs, probably obviously the main draw is the city centre, Manchester city centre, and really the provision of zero parking here just reflects what is the transport strategy for the city centre and for transport for Greater Manchester. They have an aspiration to increase active non-car journeys into the city centre by 50% up to 2040, and this links in with that. There's also, if you like, the other end of the journey, and actually what's happening with parking provision in Manchester city centre is that is reducing over time. At the same time as the number of jobs there is increasing. We've got a lot of surface level car parks that have been in place over the past 10, 15 years that were temporary car parks earmarked for construction. A lot of those are going now. There's one adjacent to the office that I'm working at the moment, which has been replaced over the past year by a building. And actually, the travel patterns we do see in the city centre at the moment are travel by car is very, very much the minority. As part, I can speak to this project in particular as part of understanding the baseline of travel behaviours in Oldham at the moment and travel on the tram from Oldham into Manchester. I put a straw poll out to colleagues in the office. We have around 200 colleagues working in the city centre, and immediate responses from a large number of them that travel from Oldham to Manchester daily by Metrolink. And also, I think if you compare journey options by road into the city centre at the start and end of a working day, the tram journey is quicker and a bit more reliable. I should also speak to the fact that I know that the Metrolink, we've heard some comments that trams can be busy in the morning, travelling between Oldham and the city centre, and the same the other way back. Part of Transport for Manchester's transport strategy, and also Manchester's light rail transit strategy, is to increase the number of trams on the network to increase capacity. I think we have around 1 in 3 trams in the peak hour is a double tram. There's space for increase the number of double trams to increase capacity over time. And what we're looking here is, as Alex has set out, a lot of this is outlined because we're going to be building over the course of the coming 10, 15 years. And so that's a kind of gradual increase in demand that can be met by that, by the additional capacity being provided over time as well.
Thank you. Councillor Harkness, did you intimate you wanted to speak?
Yeah, thank you. And a good answer which has answered quite a bit of what I was going to ask, so thank you for that. The only bit I would add on that is around back onto the parking situation, and Peter's talked a bit about that, and there's going to be a wider scheme. I just wanted to ask a bit about, in terms of sustainable transport, EV spaces, and if you've got any ideas on what proportion of the parking going forward across these sites would be for have EV charging points and that sort of thing. And then the second question is, a colleague of mine wanted me to ask you what's happening with the bunker down below.
Car park.
Sorry, just before you answer that question, because I'm interested myself in that. First of all, is it actually, or was it actually Cold War bunker? Because I find it pretty unusual they'd stick it under 3,000 under 3,000 tons of concrete in case of a nuclear strike. So, is it a designated nuclear Cold War bunker and therefore some sort of heritage thing, or is it just a basement? That's one for Peter.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll speak on the EV parking, and yeah, I'll leave the Cold War stuff. Yeah. So yeah, the intention is that those parking spaces would be EV, have EV charging. Yeah, all of them. Yeah, yeah.
Peter, we've all been watching Threads, haven't we? So
first of all, so the bunker, as I'm saying, is actually under the tower. So obviously, in terms of this particular application we're looking at the moment, it's not affected by it. And the tower is remaining in place, as you'll see in the application later on. It's about a change of use of the tower. So the bunker room potentially is still there. I'm not aware of any particular plans at the moment to do anything with it. Is it truly a bunker? I'm not quite sure. I think like yourself. I think it was more a room with a red phone, as long as I understood it. But yes, it's something that can be explored. I think when we look at the change of use of the tower.
Alex, would you like to comment on that particular?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I have had a conversation around the bunker with a councillor previously. So, yeah, as Peter said, it's something we can certainly explore, given the history.
As councillors, we can all do with a bunker from time to time. Trust me. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. So, you're the man who's lived and breathed it. So you're probably the man to ask this question. So, can you tell me about any studies, research, any engagement that you might have done with health authorities or, health people in terms of the 1,600 dwellings and the pressures that they'll probably create on our existing health services? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll probably defer this over to Hannah, but from memory, because there were a lot of documents that were submitted as part of the application, there was a health impact assessment that was undertaken for all of these, which I don't know the details off the top of my head in terms that I'd be able to sit here and confidently say this is exactly what it said. But that study was done. So I didn't know if you wanted to add anything onto that, Hannah, at all.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Hannah Blunstone. I'm a planning consultant at CBRE, an agent for the application. As Alex says, yeah, the application was submitted with an environmental impact assessment. One of the chapters in that was about human health and socioeconomic, and that looked at pretty similar to what Peter was explaining in terms of the capacity of schools as well. It looked at the current sort of GP ratios within the borough, and also what looking at the scheme itself and then the cumulative impact of the other sites coming forward and what that would mean. And in terms of the GP ratio, it concluded that it was still within the sort of national best practice limit, essentially. But as obviously, as Peter set out, you know, as the next phases come forward over the 10 to 15 year period as sites developed, the provision of each, you know, as the blocks come forward, that provision again will be looked at, and whether there's anything that needs to be delivered at the ground floor, you know, to accommodate.
If I can ask a follow-up question, please.
Certainly, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. So you've touched upon GP services, and that's great, but you will have heard the conversation earlier. That's not what I'm concerned about. The concerns are Oldham Royal. So is there any studies or anything, any engagement with health authorities, health partners, in terms of how this vision, how this scheme is going to affect, just like, apologies, just like we talk about the environment, the education, the health service, the hospital has got to be out there. It's all, I've mentioned it earlier. Pick any day, any time, walk in there, you'll be in there for at least 6 hours if you're lucky. So how is this scheme going to make it any worse? So what I'm after is some reassurances that everything's going to be okay, or we've at least looked at it. Thank you.
If you can answer the question, please do.
And if the answer is no, we've not looked at it, we've only concentrated on GPs, then that's something that we can take away.
No, fine. I think, and like I said before, I can't remember all the details of the health impact assessment off the top of my head. I don't know, and I wouldn't be able to say for certain right now that Oldham Royal was looked at specifically, but certainly something I can come back to.
Yeah, that'd be good, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll bring Peter on in this point.
I think just, again, cause it's a little bit of an unfair question for the developer, because like I said earlier, in terms of things like Oldham Royal, in terms of hospitals, that's far bigger than one single development for them to look at. So it is something that, I say, we as a council, with our partners in the NHS, are already looking at and seeing how services could be reviewed or changed or done differently in light of growth across the borough. So we are looking at it, but it's not for this application to fix that. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, sorry, I don't feel it is an unfair question. I mean, we are in a room, we are in a meeting called the Planning Committee meeting, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but we talk about education, we talk about the environment. It is reasonable to assume that a scheme like this is going to create a problem for existing health, such as the hospital. So all I was asking is, has that been factored in? If not, can it be? We talk about contributions for education, green space. Is there not a contribution for Oldham Royal? Thank you.
So my point was not that it's not an unreasonable question. My point was it was not a fair question for the developer, because, like I'm saying to you, something like Oldham Royal is not simply about one development. It's about the whole growth in the whole borough, and how the services therefore will be affected by that growth and how we manage that. It's not for this development to address those issues. Things like GPs, which are more localised, or other localised health services, pharmacies, for example, yes, that's why those kind of things were looked at by the applicant. But a hospital is a much bigger beast with a much bigger, a wider footprint, if you like, in terms of where the impacts are coming from, and so it's a more strategic discussion between the likes of ourselves and health partners and others.
So I suppose, just coming in, Peter, every application has an impact in some degree, and like Councillor Murphy says, on hospital usage, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Therefore, potentially, it's either a question for every application, or, as you are suggesting, it's not fair or relevant to specifically put it on this one. Is that how I'm reading it? Okay, thank you. Councillor Hoban?
I'm first. Trying to pinch my mic off me. Possibly not planning, but I'd like some information if possible. I'm not in the game, so I've never heard them used before. I've not seen anything that you've done before. So if you could tell us of anything that we might have seen that belongs to Muse, that'd be nice. My other part of this is the development. I'm presuming, I might be wrong, but the 4 people on the table won't be donning hobnail boots and laying any bricks or anything like that. When the work does come about, will you be using local companies? How much local companies? How much of the local borough will you be using in these developments, rather than people from? I'm not scared of outsiders. I'm just wondering if if you'll be using local companies and possibly local apprenticeships and stuff like that. Is that all part of the plan?
Thank you very much. I'll pick the Muse project point up first. I'll choose one that's probably closest to here. So over the last 20 years, we've worked with Salford City Council before my time of joining Muse, but that was a wholesale regeneration of the area just north of what you know as Spinningfields now, which was previously, underutilised brownfield land. And in total, that's a really good example of proper regeneration, because it delivered a mix of just over 1,000 residential homes. It was 1 million square foot of commercial space as well. You then had, public areas, public parks, and our office is actually now based within that, so I kind of get to see it day in, day out. And it's had a massive impact. And I think one of the things that struck me when I first joined Muse was seeing a kind of before and after picture to kind of see the scale of it. So that's probably the closest one to where we are now. In terms of your point around local supply chain and local suppliers, it's a key consideration as part of our procurement strategy. So as part of our procurement strategy, we want to provide a requirement on any main contractors that we work with to deliver these schemes to actively seek out local suppliers. We're looking at holding a supplier event in the near future as well for people to come and talk to us, to essentially put their names down and say, look, we're an Oldham-based business. This is what we do, and this is why we want to be involved. I want to start drumming that up so that we've got that solid database. That's also coupled with the Oldham trading platform that recently launched, which I think is, I was on a call today where it was being ran through, and I think that's a phenomenal thing. I've never seen that anywhere else where I've worked. And the fact that you've already got, I think it's around 80 businesses signed up with another 150 waiting to be approved and gone through the process, that's going to be huge, because it's just a sure point for any main contractor that's coming into the town centre, or any contractor doing anything, to say, okay, I need some local suppliers, or I need a local supply chain. This is where you can go. So absolutely, it's part of our committed. It's part of our vision, I guess, as part of the delivery, to try and keep as much of the trade as we can in Oldham and from Oldham as well.
Thank you. I think commitment was the word you were looking for.
Commitment it was. Yeah.
But one would imagine that as part of your relationship with OMBC, such things in terms of local employment, bringing things to the local economy, was a basis for the agreement you have.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. There's a general, lots of things to talk around social value. Give you one example is we had recently in the summer, and over the last, I think they finished their placement probably about a month or so ago, we had 2 T-level students from Oldham College who joined us and worked really actively with myself and my colleague Hugh, one of which we've offered a position for at Muse. And it's something that, I'll go back to what I said at the start, we're not here where we stay for a year and then we're out, and that's the last you'll see of us, unfortunately. We're a long-term regeneration partner, and part of what we do isn't just developing the places, but it's about having that legacy and creating something that's more than just the buildings that are constructed.
Did you wish to speak, Councillor?
Yeah, I've got a couple of further questions. I think one of them was around local employment, etc. But you partially answered that. But what in terms of social value itself, not just initially around employment and traineeships, what about putting into projects within the local sort of economy and neighbourhoods, working in partnership with community groups? Is there any targets around that, and are there any targets on local employment and apprenticeships in terms of based on the actual spend? Because obviously, on average, every £1 million you create an apprenticeship. Are we committed to that or not? And then the other question was around, obviously, this is a highly dense sort of development on this particular site itself, and we're looking at creating a lot of public spaces in between. And what kind of sort of crime and community safety measures are being put in place to ensure that it doesn't become problematic for us sort of in the near future? Because obviously some of the highly dense sort of developments similar to this in the past, if we learn from history, were unsuccessful because of all the criminality sort of aspects that went on, and they had all these little small guinnels here and there, and criminals can easily sort of hide and get away. So are we going to ensure that we've learned from that, and this particular development's going to be sort of different and sustainable?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll just go through them one by one. So in terms of the local apprentices and employment targets, that will, again, form part of the procurement strategy as we go through the tender process to appoint the main contractors. So there'll be targets set within that to make sure that, X amount, and the figures will vary in terms of contract value and everything else.
But that's contractors, but what about with Muse itself?
So Muse ourselves, obviously mentioned with the T-level students, with the local employment, so we have offered a role to one of the T-level students. That whole programme was so successful and had such good feedback internally that we'd be looking to undertake that again as part of our offering. The wider piece as well, we're looking to work along with our professional team. So as part of their appointment to the project team, what can they offer that's tangible, and not just to say, okay, yes, our input into this will deliver X pounds of social value, but something actually tangible. So can you go into the college or one of the schools to provide pro bono advice, or can you help local businesses with, let's say they have a planning application that they need to get in because they want to put, increase their sustainability measures on their building and install PV panels, for example. They're all offerings that we're working through with the consultant team to say, what's a tangible thing that you can do as part of this process and as part of being part of the project team that will actually have a direct effect, and something that you can sit there and go, that has happened because of this company or entity that's worked on the project and the master plan as a whole. So we're looking to cover as many bases as we can within that. We have specialist social value consultants on board as well who can help us through the tender process to ensure it aligned with Oldham's framework, so that that's fully aligned, and also then give us guidance and advice around meanwhile uses, how we can activate some of the development plots before they're ready for development, so that they're not just underutilised land, and just kind of keep that going. That will then complement the general Oldham event schedule and general activity in the town centre, because I think as soon as you start bringing that activity into it, the interest starts coming, and you can really see stuff moving forward. So I hope that answers that part of the question. In terms of crime, so we worked as part of the planning applications, we undertook crime impact assessments, worked closely with Greater Manchester Police, and that is really front and forefront of design. I might have to pass to you at some point on this, but you look at something, it's called secure by design. So it's developing and building schemes and plans that remove aspects, as you've mentioned, such as ginnels or areas where antisocial behaviour might take place. So that has always been as part of that design process, to make sure that the developments aren't in a position whereby in 2-3 years' time crime's exponentially going to increase, or there are going to be issues with antisocial behaviour there. So I didn't know if you wanted to add on.
I can chip in a little.
Yeah, shall I move that to you?
Yeah, hi, James Thompson from Hawkins Brown. We're the architects for the project. No, it's a good question. As Alex has mentioned, we consulted with Greater Manchester Police, and for both of the two full applications, and as they will do for the future Reserve Matters applications, they reviewed the scheme as it was in development. They provided a comprehensive document that reviewed all aspects from perspective of ensuring we're providing a safe environment that reduces crime by passive measures, essentially by its design, rather than needing to be overly policed. Those reports made recommendations which were then factored into the design, and that's now created a really kind of high quality proposal that eradicates potential places where people could loiter. Antisocial behaviour has kind of been designed out, both in the shape of the buildings, but also ensuring that entrances are highly visible, very well lit, that the landscaping is equally as considered as much as the architecture. So, the heights of planting and tree canopies and bushes and all the rest of it. But essentially, I think one of the kind of underlying factors in all of these development is the really high quality approach in the kind of in the design, in the materials that have been applied to the thinking. We're creating spaces that are built to last, built for the long term, and with an appropriate level of quality, such that people can feel pride in the place that they live, a sense of ownership, a strong sense of community. Again, all of which kind of help naturally police their environments, where you've got actually people who care about where they live and will themselves be keeping an eye out for crime and antisocial behaviour.
Thank you. Councillor Hurley.
Thank you. I'm just going to say it, because are we voting on this today because we need to get a tick done so that we can then go and find the money to do it? Because without this agreement, can't go forward and find the money from government. So that's one question. The other one is, so I absolutely take on what Dave said, that, this infrastructure, wouldn't that be done first? And I know Spinningfields really well, and that infrastructure was there before they started that. There was lots of stuff there. And what doesn't happen in Spinningfields, and I know this for a fact, there's no families living there. There's no families. So these 3-bedroom apartments that are there, that aren't many, by the way, a bit like us, where we've got a monopoly of 1-bedroom flats. Oldham people are not Manchester people. What gives you the confidence, because it isn't giving me any right now, that this is going to work here in Oldham? And I just want to look on this tick box exercise. Are we voting tonight to go, oh yes, this is a fabulous idea, yes, I vote for it, that enables a tick for you to go away and find the money for this project? I know it sounds a bit harsh, but I do want to know. Thanks.
Peter?
I'll come in on that first point, because again, it's a matter of process. And so no, tonight there's nothing to do with funding. Tonight is you're assessing the applications before you based upon the planning merits of those proposals, assessing them against our local plan, against national policy, and whether they satisfy those policies. It's a completely separate matter. Obviously in planning we don't look at values or anything like that, as in financial values. We have to look at it purely on the planning basis. So no, this is not a tick box exercise in order to go and do something else. Yes, having planning permission sometimes does help to get funding, but that's not what this is about. This is the proposal. So block A, for example, on the screen there now for the application we're looking at the moment, Muse are asking for planning permission to develop that block. And that's all you have to consider in that sense. It's not about the funding for you as a planning committee. I'll let Alex come in on the second point.
Thank you. What's given me the confidence, how I've got the confidence that it will work? I think I'll go back to what I said earlier on. We're looking to create a market, a residential market in the town centre here. There are lots of other examples around Greater Manchester, let's say Stockport or Wythenshawe as well, where town centre development, which wasn't there before, and has come in has brought people into the town centre, and there's a demand for that. And I think if you look at, and I'm not going to quote figures that I don't know off the top of my head, but if you look at general population growth and the general interest in Greater Manchester as a whole, I'm very confident. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we weren't confident that we would be able to, that this would be an attractive opportunity for whether it's private investors or registered providers. As an example, we've spoken with a number of registered providers in the area already. So for Prince's Gate, which we'll talk about later on this evening, the first phase of that is looking to come forward as affordable housing. And we've had lots of interest from registered providers to say, absolutely a location that we want, absolutely, let us know once the marketing process is underway. So we know there's interest there, and similarly with the more build-to-rent elements of the scheme or for sale, there's interest there. We've done that kind of market analysis initially and the soft market testing to really understand, is Oldham a location that is of interest? And it's always been yes. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be looking to do that, because you need the interest and you need to bring the footfall in, which will then drive the investment, help the local businesses with having more money spent in the town centre, and then it's almost a bit of a chain reaction that moves that forward. So although we're talking about a longer time of 10 to 15 years, once we get going on Prince's Gate for the first phase to come forward, it's almost looking to be a domino effect where we can go, right, okay, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and really just build on the success and the additional interest that will be, and spotlight that will be shown on Oldham because of what's been granted or hoping to be granted, and what is actually being delivered and is able to be delivered with people who are interested in living and working there.
Thank you. Councillor Holbein.
Thank you. Before I do my question, that's quite interesting from Councillor Hurley, because I was thinking the same. But then when you look at, and I know Oldham people aren't Manchester people, but when you look at areas of Manchester like the northern quarter, that was I won't say the word something hole, but it was not the nicest part of Manchester. And that has just grown from the centre outwards, and it's a magnificent place now. And we all know that town centres are dying in the traditional way. And I think this is quite exciting if we can get anything like that thing that they've done in Manchester in Ancoats. If we can bring anything like that into Oldham, I think it will do the town centre the world of good. That wasn't my question. That was just an odd thing. My question was. I apologise to the architect for saying that you just draw boxes these days, but as part of the whole the regeneration, is there any chance that we could have something other than just boxes? And I know that's being quite trite, really, but aesthetically, I would like to see different things. As I mentioned with Ancoats, they've done old mills and they've done different things and different shapes and sizes. I really don't want a uniform kind of thing. So if I could ask you to not do, I hope they're not that grey. Are they that grey colour that we're going to have? Or was that right? Because that made it even worse. But yeah, if we could have something a bit more, yeah, that looks like Alcatraz or something like that, doesn't it? Right. Okay. So yeah, my call would just be to just a bit more than a box somewhere. Thank you.
Just moving before you answer, just for Councillor Holbein's benefit, the project, the applications we're discussing tonight are obviously the ones we're discussing tonight, and the aesthetics and stuff. And I appreciate your sentiments, but this is part of a wider plan. So I just wanted to bring Peter in and just try to describe some of the other aspects in terms of dwellings that are part of the wider plan, which we'll get onto at another meeting.
Yeah, so we're looking at the applications that are here before you tonight, and in detail, particularly this first phase of this one and the Prince's Gate one is in detail. But even on the other outline ones, obviously there's indication about there being apartments, and there's not hiding away from that. That is the focus of these applications. But obviously there are other sites in the town centre, council-owned sites as well, and we are exploring other solutions, residential solutions on some of those sites as well. So they're not part of what's before you tonight, and I appreciate that. But we know that the demand, if you like, is looking for a mixture of uses. You know, do I think not? You've asked the right person asking Alex and about or other members have about the demand, if you like, about for this kind of use. But in my opinion, I do think that this will be very successful. You know, it's not, as you say, Oldhamers aren't Manchester people, they're not Stockport people, they're not Bury people, but we're all human beings and we're all very varied. And there are quite a number of people in this borough that don't own a car, that would love to live in a place like this. You know, and I think it's very easy to fall back on the Englishman in his castle mentality if that's what we have to provide. We don't. And as you said, in places like Northern Quarter, as Alex referred to in terms of the Muse scheme in the Chapel Street, Spinningfields area of Salford, you know, it's worked. It is working. They're thriving communities. So, yeah, but we'll always look to do a mixture in terms of what we're looking at in other sites in the future.
I'll just before you come in, I just wanted to make the point that, in essence, as you're probably aware, and so are the members of this committee, quite a lot of Oldham's housing stock is in poor condition. You know, we're a Victorian mill town at the end of the day, and a lot of terrace houses, get that right, thank God. Terrace houses were, you know, a lot of them was demolished after the war and stuff like that because they were inhabitable. And I suppose the suggestion I'm sort of making and see if it's something you concur is by people moving from that housing stock into this kind of developments we're talking as the wider plan, that then vacates them potentially for redevelopment and therefore progressing that housing stock from what it was to something new. I mean, is that part of the ethos or is that just me wishful thinking?
No, I mean, I'm obviously focusing just on the sites that we're talking about today, so I wouldn't be able to comment on, you know.
Well, what I'm trying to pin you down, who's going to be moving in them? Is it existing Oldham people it's targeted at?
It'll be a mix. So there'll be existing Oldham people who move in. I can't say exactly who's going to move in for obvious reasons, but there'll be a mixture of existing people. There'll be new people coming into the town centre as well. This is obviously apartment-led, as Peter said, and you essentially said what I was going to say as well in terms of there are wider opportunities for more traditional housing in the future if they become available, essentially.
Anybody?
Chair, Chair, obviously, I don't know if I'm reading this right or not, but in my opinion, this development is about attracting new residents into the town centre. It's not about just Oldham residents. It's about the wider region, Greater Manchester. How can we attract economically active residents from across the region to come in and live in Oldham? And that's the ambition that we've got to have. Obviously, we need to cater for current residents, and the developments that are coming forward will hopefully do that, but it's about how we can actually change the demographics of Oldham and get those, and basically have a greater ambition than what we've had in the past as well.
And on top of that, can I just, because Peter was looking at me while he was talking about, none of my comments I hope are too negative, because I'm quite positive about this. I think it's something that we need to do in the town centre to rejuvenate it. So I'm not. Please don't think I'm negative, Nelly, or anything like that. I'm positive on this.
We just want assurances that it's going to work.
Yeah.
Can you give assurances, Peter?
No pressure. The bottom line is, I mean, I think, to go back to Councillor Akhtar, what you were saying there, it's what Alex said before. This is about a mix. It isn't just for people to move into the borough. It isn't just for Oldhamers. It's both. And I think that's really important, because you're right. Yeah, we want to attract people in who aspire and would want to live in a vibrant town centre, and they're part of making it vibrant. You know, that's what it comes down to with these places that we've been talking about elsewhere. It's the people that make it vibrant. It's the people that run the businesses on the ground floor that help make it vibrant. It's the, you know, so it's always coming back to people. But it's also about for Oldhamers to have those aspirations. And, you know, as Councillor Hints was saying, maybe some of the housing stock in this borough is not what we would want it to be. And this is an opportunity for people to have a much better quality of home in a town centre, living differently maybe than they have done before. But is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. You know, if I could live in a place where I didn't need a car, fantastic. You know, £2 bus fares to get everywhere, a metro link to various different parts of Greater Manchester. You know, you don't need a car if you're in Oldham town centre. So I think, you know, it is a very exciting proposal, and I'm conscious that we've taken a lot of time, so I don't know if there's any more questions for the applicant, but you know, so it's moving more for the debate and decision. But I appreciate the concerns that have been raised. They're genuine. They're very, you know, we are conscious of them too. Do I have all the answers tonight? No. You know, and neither does Alex. We'll take them away. There's still the reserve matters to come where we can explore some of those things further. But obviously, as officers, we've put forward this application and the others for a recommendation for approval, because we think they're positive things that will add, as Councillor Hoban has said, add significantly to this town centre.
Thank you. And obviously, members are rightly up because of the magnitude of the proposals and the long-standing effects. I mean, it's not just a quick thing. So obviously, all the questions are valid and respected in that matter. But I'd just like to ask: do we have any specific questions relating to the this application for this particular site? No. Is there any questions between members? Councillor Davis.
It's not a particular question, really. I mean, you can take it as one if you want, but the point is, though, and I know we're talking about the first one at the moment, but there's other developments, and that's what most of the questions are aimed at, are the developments. And there's been comments about the availability of facilities for people, whether it's health centres or whatever. But my thinking about that is that these developments are going to be over 2 to 15, 20 years. So all that's going to develop as we go along, isn't it? It's not going to be all of a sudden we've got 3, 4, 5,000 people in the town centre all of a sudden, and they all need health centres and schools. So it's going to be over a period of time where it's going to develop.
Thank you. Any for Councillor Murphy?
Throughout this application, we've had some discussions, and I want to just make it quite clear that I am for this application. I think it is a good thing. We've seen it all over Manchester. You go to Bury, they're doing something similar around there. So I'm not against it. It's just that when all this gets approved later on, no doubt, and the media pick it up that 1,600 dwellings were approved, and then I go knocking on my doors later on, and residents say to me, "Yeah, but what about all these, you know, doctor surgeries? What about the hospitals? And you voted for that. I need to have the answers." So that's why I'm sort of shining the light in the officers and your eyes to ask where it's been considered, whether it's been considered. Because at the moment, I haven't had that back in, but in reserve matters, I will definitely be looking for it. And on that note, I'll move approval.
I believe Councillor Hartness wished to speak.
Yeah, it was just a question to officers, and I think it was like on Peter's comments making about that some of these projects are over like 10, 15, 20 years and so on. I just wanted some clarification, because usually when you get a planning application, you have to have started work on it within 3 years, don't you? So I'm just seeing how that would work in these cases.
Yeah, it's actually picked up in the resolution. So the numbers there, the number 15 appears where you would normally expect to see the number 3. So on the conditions, the first condition for the reserve masters application, for instance, the outline application rather.
So I have a proposal from Councillor Murphy. Do I get a seconder?
Yeah, Chair. Before I second it, obviously I second what Councillor Murphy's sort of recommendations. Well, the recommendation in front of us. Like you said, this is a once in a generation sort of opportunity. These are ambitious and exciting sort of plans, and I just hope that we get this right, and future generations actually praise us when in another 15 to 20 years. And obviously, as we go along, there will be some changes because it's a 15-year partnership, like you said, and hopefully we'll get it right.
I think everyone in the room universally agrees with your sentiments, Councillor. I certainly do. So I have a proposal, I have a seconder. All in favour? Unanimously passed. Sorry, are you abstaining, Councillor Early? Sorry, I thought you had your hand up. Could we just record, could we note that Councillor Hurley abstained? So I think we've covered the general questions regarding the overall proposal. So when we move on now, if we could keep to the specifics regarding the individual application. So I'd like to move on now to item number 7, which is a former Magistrates Court on King Street. And if I hand over to Graham on this one. Yeah, they're fine, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair. So this is the second of the applications. This is one of 2 applications which are completely in outline form, unlike the previous scheme we got forward, and it relates to the site immediately over the road from ourselves there, the former Magistrates Court site, which obviously, as you'll know and you'll see on the image there, is completely cleared. It was last used as a contractor's depot on the site. So obviously this is just on the opposite side of West Street, and essentially a similar form of development to be proposed on there. So what we have here is not obviously the details of the scheme, but more the principles to go forward. The main image that you can see indicates the kind of plot areas. So effectively the vision here is for 2 blocks to be erected. So they're the areas in the centre of the site. You can see the kind of purple colour and the darker shade, with communal areas around those. Access for itself will come off King Street, as access to the site previously did, in the southwest corner. This again, all indicative, gives you a vision of what it's intended to look like. So obviously with landscaping areas mixed within there, and 2 blocks rising in height as you rise up away from the roundabout at the top of Middleton Road. This is giving you again indicative plans, so it shows you the vision in terms of the potential layouts of the buildings. So as I say, in the bottom left hand corner, the access there leading to a small car parking area. As with the previous scheme, the spaces there will be limited to servicing and to facilities for disabled persons parking. Communal landscaping areas would be provided within the sites, that's the plot areas, and also tying in with the later application that you'll see for Manchester Chambers, the proposals include additional public realm areas linking through to George Square, and obviously the outdoor market that's proposed to be within there. So as I say, obviously recommended for approval, conditions listed. Many of the issues in terms of parking and contributions and so on are as with the previous application. So therefore, I just thank you, Chair, recommend for committee support the recommendation for approval subject to those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have any questions for the officers? No. Do we have any questions for the developers? Councillor Harkness?
I At the top of the roofs of those buildings there, are they supposed to be communal gardens? On the previous picture, you've got some green space at the top. Are they communal gardens? Is it sort of a, what's the purpose of that, or is that just
green paint?
Decided? Or is it just a green roof, or what?
It's a cafe. Terrace.
Oh, thanks for the question. I'll take that one. I mean, these images are for illustrative purposes only, but the aspiration is that they will have green roofs that support, a biodiversity gain on the site. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hartness. Any further questions? All at once? Can we have one? just for the minutes? Can we have a? Yeah. Okay. Move in a second. All in favour? Abstentions? No, it's unanimously passed. Thank you. We move on now to item 8.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, it's a site I'm sure everybody in this room knows well. This is the former leisure centre site, which has been previously had a car park temporarily on the site, but since then remedial works have currently taken place on there to essentially set the site out ready for bringing forward. So again, details, you all know the area, obviously over the other side of the town centre. These are just some images showing the site now, so obviously the levels have been changed on there to prepare the platforms ready for future development on the site. As with the previous scheme, the indication there, so the 3 colours, the blue colour and the kind of purple colour on the right, essentially giving you the plot areas of the buildings that are envisaged to go on the site. Servicing from the area will come off the left hand side there. This will be the communal areas. This image showing you obviously the top view, giving the aerials. To the right of that obviously is the grade 2 star listed Oldham Parish Church and the conservation area that surrounds that. So obviously extra consideration has to be given in this particular site to the duty to ensure there is no harm to that building. A heritage assessment submitted with the application, which obviously we agree with the outcome of that suggests that there would be less than substantial harm. That's a phrase that's obviously set out in national planning policy. Where development will cause that, then it has to be outweighed by the public benefit. And following through from the debates that you've had previously, the development of this site, bringing forward productive use, creating new housing on the site, is deemed to certainly represent a public benefit for the site. In terms also in the relationship to that, the bottom image is just giving you an indication that, again, members I'm sure are aware of the linear park, which will separate the site from the church, which obviously reduces the impact on that, but also it actually provides an area that shows how the building could interact with that open space. So the image there that shows you the 2 buildings, the taller building at the back of the site adjacent to St Mary's Way, slightly lower building facing the site but longer building which takes advantage of the views across the site and allows it to interact with that site. In addition to the residential, there is some commercial space on the ground floor, and that's indicated that hopefully we could get something on there, maybe a cafe, maybe some retail that connects in for the public use on the ground floor and make sure that this isn't an isolated development from that. And again, this is just showing you indicative layouts, the servicing areas in the centre between the 2 buildings, landscaping around the site, and as I say, for future residents, essentially a park immediately outside your doors on the site. Again, reiterate, conditions set out to deal with all the technical matters. There would need to be a reserved matters application for the full details when they come forward. Recommend that committee supports the application subject to those conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Once again, do we have any questions for the officer? No, thank you. Do we have any... Oh, sorry. Councillor?
Just for clarity, it says Ward Coldhurst. Is it St Mary's or have I got it wrong?
It's coldest. It's coldest.
Is it Coldhurst? Just for my own knowledge. Yeah, because it's where it is. It's just... Yeah, just... Sorry, Graham, just for clarity. It's bugging us, that's why.
Checking where the votes are coming from.
It's in Oldham.
No, that's fine. Do we have any questions for the developers on this one? Do I get someone who... Councillor Holbein to propose second? All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, land at Prince's Gate, Prince Street, Oldham.
Again, thank you, Chair. Now, this one is a full application, so obviously what we're looking for committee to look at here is the actual details of the scheme itself, so the design, size of the buildings, the layout of the site, servicing, provision, and so forth. Again, members will know the site, Mumps, adjacent to the Mumps tram stop, so obviously adding to its accessibility with the bus stops nearby as well. Currently used for car parking area on the site, following the demolition of the previous retail warehouse that was on there. Just some images, the area, as I say, I'm sure members know this well. This is the detailed proposals for the site. Essentially, it involves 3 blocks, 2 of which are interlinked by a communal entrance area that would actually also provide some communal facilities, such as small leisure gymnasium type use within the ground floor of the building, and a separate block that will be located at the junction of Oldham Way and Prince Street. That block is the one that Alex referred to earlier on, that would be looking forward to coming first in the development, and which is expected potentially to be for affordable housing. That would come forward as the first block on the development. What you will see on some of the images, that there is a significant area of open space on the site that links towards the public realm and the Metrolink tram stop. Similarly, on the ground floor of these uses, these buildings, there will be opportunities for commercial uses to be in there, which again adds to the status of the site. Obviously gives it a wider importance, so people coming off the tram and so forth can make use of those services as well. Car parking limited again to specific disabled person spaces and servicing areas within the site, which comes off Prince Street with an improvement to the current access point to the car park within that area. Now on to images of the buildings themselves. So this is taken looking from Mumps effectively towards Oldham Way. So the tallest of the 3 structures is on the eastern boundary of the site. And what that allows for is that the views as you come down the hill, down Huddersfield Road, are to that focal point. And there's talk during the design process as well that we obviously have at this end of the town centre, we have a focal building, and obviously it's to create a focal arrangement there as well, with a building that obviously will be a feature point in itself. What you can see on that image then, you lead on to the second linked building, which has a ground floor area which provides all the communal facilities for that building. Other images showing you there from the west and the south of the site. So the top image show you roughly at the junction of Oldham Way and Prince Street. So again, you can see the first building to come forward on there, the lower of those structures. And then as we continue through towards the eastern boundary of the site with the taller of the buildings. Just for clarity, these are in black and white, so there's not intended to be that colour. But again, these are just the technical drawings showing you there. You've obviously seen those on the colour images that we provided. This is the ground floor of blocks A and B. Most of this area taken up really with the service facilities for the sites, or the plant rooms and so forth, bin storage, cycle storage areas and so on, with the communal area there in pink that provides the access to the site. So this will be an area that is more communal, so that probably the view that was talked about previously, where you get tower block areas and you come through a bland entrance way, you go up to your flat and so on. That's not the way these apartments are laid out. They look to have communal areas within them that obviously can then bring people together within those apartments, as well as we saw in the previous scheme for this particular development, significant areas of open space to sit out on as well. The drawings now just essentially again showing you the flats within there. Want Brian to give a comment on that as to their shape, but just going to give you that indication. And again, these are the images of the buildings themselves. Again, bottom right corner, difficult to see obviously on the screen, but again, to give you the applicant's assessment of how you could break that down so they don't just appear as a monolithic block there, that you create window detailed, you create variations in the brickwork and the styling of the brickwork within there. And that's important on this one because obviously, as I say, this is a full application, so this is giving you the imagery of how that would come forward. This is the block C, so this is the smaller of the blocks. Again, includes in the pink there in the corner commercial use on the area that links in with the open space, and again in top right corner just an image showing the detailing that's envisaged for that building. These are just the upper floors of the building, and obviously again the elevations in black and white, and photo montage really to finish off from the two different directions of the site, showing how this development would become a focal point at that end of the site itself. So slightly different recommendation from the previous applications in the sense that there'll be no reserve matters following on from this, but as a full application, the applicant's intention is that development on here will come forward as one of the first phases of the overall redevelopment scheme. So again, hopefully recommend to committee support the application subject to conditions in the report as amended on the late list.
Okay, just to clarify, Graham, when you use the term flats, you meant apartments.
When I was young, they were called flats. When I lived in one, they were called flats, but yes, apartments.
Okay. Councillor Cosgrove.
Can I just ask a question? It's about the internal. Will they be accessible? Because Oldham's got a massive shortage of 3-bed adapted homes. So will the 3-bedders be, will somebody in a wheelchair, will they be able to use them?
So thanks for the question. All of the homes throughout all of the schemes are designed to meet, it's called Building Regulations M42, which means that all the homes can be adapted to suit wheelchair users. So they come with wider doors, they're slightly oversized than the kind of standard apartment. That's following the local plan, the recommendation that's kind of applied across Greater Manchester. So yeah, in that sense, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Holbin.
Thanks, Chair. Just an observation again, not a question really. After having a go at the architect, it's just nice to see that there is so much open space on this plan, because it would be quite easy for a developer to just cram it full of tower blocks, wouldn't it? And it is to see the amount of space that's left here as open space is quite. I really like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have? Okay. Yes, that's what I was seeking questions at this point in the proceedings. So, Councillor Hurley put her hand up first, and then Councillor.
Just an observation. Well, it's something I want you to answer me. Why is this block the one having a gym and the others aren't? Why just this one?
It's just indicative at this stage, so it's just to show, you know, you might have a gym in there. The two blocks that are interconnected.
So all the others might have gyms as well.
But potentially, so the two blocks that are interconnected will be looking to be brought forward as build to rent. So what will happen is a kind of professional operator will come in, and we will then work with them to decipher what their preferred spec is. They may want one thing in the ground floor in that lobby when you come in. They might want some co-working shared space. They may want a gym. It's just part of the detail. This was just to really show, you know,
It's a two-part question, really, because I know before you said you'd been speaking to lots of social housing providers and they were all interested. And I know you can't disclose it, but is anyone interested in this as the first stage, or are they all clambering to
be
the first ones in?
Absolutely. There's interest in the first phase. We're looking to bring them forward as two different tenures, and there's interest in both tenures.
Right, and those are what? What are the two tenures?
So one will be looking to be, or intention to be, affordable housing, and the other will be built to rent. So where a private professional landlord comes in and to operate that as a kind of professional asset, essentially.
Right, okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Owen, your mic is on and it's your microphone.
Because it's making strange noises.
Oh, right, okay, just we're picking up some background conversations. Peter?
Just wanted to add something there to answer Councillor Hurley's question. So, as Alex said, obviously the gym in this particular situation is indicative as a use that could go on the ground floor, and this one could be in others too. But just to be really clear in terms of what the proposal is, and obviously what you're being asked to approve, obviously the description is for a full planning application for residential development, use class C3, alongside ancillary non-residential floor space, use classes E and F1. So use classes E and F1 cover a myriad of different commercial uses and community uses, and that's deliberate in terms of what's being applied for, is because we need that flexibility. So in terms of the ground floor uses, all we're, if you like, all you're agreeing to tonight, if you approve this, is that there will be active ground floor uses of a commercial or community nature. Obviously what they precisely are will depend upon, well, who's interested, who wants to put something there, because a lot of them will be businesses. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, in terms of whether we need any health facilities or education facilities in the future.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Cosgrove, would you like to?
To follow up on the previous question, lifts, how many, how big? Yeah.
Hi. So all of the three buildings that you can see on the screen have a kind of centralised lift entrance and lift core. So particularly in the two taller buildings that are linked, residents come in through one main entrance and they can travel into building A or building B. And each of the circulation cores in the building has 2 lifts and 2 stairs. The lifts are generously sized, A, for wheelchair users, but also for bringing furniture in and out of the buildings. And they're all fully compliant with the latest fire regulations as well.
Can I ask another one on that? What is the makeup of those? Will be affordable, social, or how homes? Do we know? Any idea?
It's TBC, so we're going through a marketing exercise at the moment, and the 10-year split, if you want to call it that, will come out of that process. So we wouldn't be able to say exactly right now.
Councillor?
It's not a question, just a general observation. Obviously, all the schemes that are coming forward have got retail on the ground floor. Can we be a bit more ambitious and have something on the upper floor as retail or as a restaurant or something like that, because of the views that we can get from up there?
I think that's a commercial decision, but could you add anything to that? That's fine, but like Peter said, it's not for us to... do you want to...
So, first of all, it's not just cafes and that kind of thing. Obviously, it's all retail. It's any kind of commercial, any kind of community use. But obviously, the ground floor is the focus, because obviously we don't want to necessarily put residential on the ground floor. where people are walking by, using that public open space, driving by an Oldham Way and what have you. In terms of the high upper floors, I mean, obviously. Okay. Okay. It's something that we can consider, I think, isn't it, as we go forward. I mean, obviously, there is a commercial aspect to it. Obviously, there is not just the actual provision of that commercial space on the floors, but the access to it. So it'd have to be a separate access from the residential. All of it starts taking away residential uses, and so, you know, we have to strike that balance because we do want these homes as well.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Peter. Councillor Harkness.
Yes, so obviously it's been in proximity of a listed building and a number of other heritage buildings. I know you've touched on that in the report, but there doesn't seem to be any comments from Heritage England or the conservation officers. I just wondered if there's any reason why that is the case.
Well, the buildings, there wouldn't be any requirement to consult from those heritage bodies. We've had no responses to that. The application is accompanied by again by a heritage assessment that considers that relationship, and obviously that goes through the criteria that are normally used in those assessments. So yes, it has been considered. Obviously I didn't refer to it there, but yes, it is in there, and it is a detailed report on the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Do we get someone? That's okay. We have Brian to move and Councillor Rickmell to second. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So now we move on to number 10, Manchester Chambers, West Street, Oldham.
So thank you, Chair. So we've moved on now slightly from the residential schemes to looking at the kind of ancillary developments within the town centre and the improvements that can be brought forward on there. Again, this is a building I'm sure everybody knows well, Manchester Chambers, and the former Three Crowns public house that was next to it is latterly used as a food bank, but obviously now he's falling into a poor state of repair. In terms of the building itself, obviously number of units that are in there at the moment are occupied, very limited within there. You have the main building itself, which is a focal building, what you would term a non-designated heritage asset, but which at the moment suffers from the environment around it. So the building itself, in addition to that, so you have this later addition of the pub with its mock Tudor finish and sections of flat roof structure to the side of the building, and then separated by the arcade, looking at the right hand building, the section that adjoins on to George Square. So the proposal effectively is to remove those flat roof single storey sections of the building and to redevelop on those areas of the site. On the parts of the buildings adjacent to the side of the site, which I referred to briefly in terms of the Magistrates Court, that area won't be redeveloped, and that then improves the area of communal realm that links through to George Square and up to the bus station. So this is the area in the bottom corner of the site. You might be able to work out there's a red edge around there, which shows you how that area and access through that will be improved. So again, this is about demolition of the bits of the building which are either in poor state of repair or which are underused, and to hopefully get redevelopment around that first of all connects in on the rear section with the new market area on George Square, but also provides additional retail space on ground floor uses and areas above the building, which is more, should we say, aesthetically pleasing than the structures are at the moment. So again, recommend for approval, subject to conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Just before we move to questions, Councillor Hurley, did you leave the room, or were you just in the room? Okay, I'm just clarifying that for the notes. Do we have any questions? We can move for approval, so... Yeah. All in favour? Unanimous. We now move on to the last but not least, the Civic Centre Tower, which has been a lot of speculation about. We can...
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this final application, and this is sort of a proposal. Obviously, as members will know, the tower is now empty. So there is a need to look at potential alternative uses for the building, and the application at the moment considers one option for that, which is use as a hotel, and the potential for that. This would then obviously have to be considered in terms of time frames. So if a hotel operator came forward, as members were shown in terms of the Civic Centre site, redevelopment of the rest of the site would be over a lengthy period of time before that could... over a lengthy period of time. And that's important in terms of servicing of the site, and particularly as you would see one of the representations, or a couple of the representations made by members of the public about access for disabled people to the site and how that could be brought forward. For that reason, there's a condition that's been recommended on the application for further details of how the building will be serviced, how access, particularly for disabled people, would be provided at that stage to come forward. Because obviously if this happened tomorrow, you have the existing service area that serves the building at the moment. After redevelopment, access would still be taken through the new development, but we would need obviously to know those details. So that will be subject to one condition. Just one other final element to mention on this particular scheme, and people will know this, that on top of the tower we do have some residents at the moment. As a result, as a protected species, there is a condition so that any new developer who goes on there, for instance, wants to put new plants up there and so on, that we protect those at that time. Really, though, it's just an excuse for me.
Just to clarify for the record, we're talking about feathery
well, it would be,
residents.
Right,
there are birds up there.
I thought there was people in tents on the roof or something then.
So, yeah, this is actually a picture taken from an 11th floor windowsill of the building. So,
What have you named it, Graham?
It's called Graham.
Yeah, it looks miserable.
Standards complaint.
So again, as I say, there are no further details. So there's no internal layouts and so forth for the building. It's merely to establish what are other acceptable uses for a building, bring it back into productive use, and obviously permission is granted for this. Any hotel operators will be interested, obviously know that the principle of such development would be acceptable. So again, subject to conditions in the report, recommend for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions? Do we get a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove, all in favour? You were here for this one, Maggie, weren't you? All right. Any abstentions? Any against? Okay. So that's 13 for and 1 against. Okay, that's there's no appeals or anything like that today, is there? Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending. I bring the meeting to a close, and thanks to the developers for your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.